From each section in the auditorium, we need a volunteer to give them one word to use in their poem that they're going to write for you. Do I have a volunteer from this section? I saw this hand first.
Chicken.
Your first word is chicken. Your second word is?
Grandpa.
Chicken and grandpa. And your third word is from the back? I can't do back there. What's your word?
Raspberry.
Raspberry. Chicken, grandpa, and raspberry.
All right, so come on back.
Your only task is to write a poem using those three words. Good luck.
All right, so while they do their thing writing poetry, we have the next event. The next event is a favorite at Writers Week. It's called Two Truths and a Lie. We have 3 faculty members who are going to come up and tell a story. 2 of them are telling the truth. 1 of them is telling a lie. You need to listen carefully because after they're finished telling their stories, you will have a chance to ask questions trying to figure out who is lying. Okay? Appropriate, probing questions. Okay? After that, we may have time to talk a little bit, and then we'll hear the poems. But without further ado, let me introduce your Two Truths and a Lie faculty members. Before getting into education, he was into graphic design. If you've ever seen the Heine Heider's company logo while in a bathroom stall at LHS, you can thank him for designing it. It's the only thing he successfully did in the design field. Since then, he's submitted over 50 graphic designs to various cloth diaper companies, but each has been rejected mostly because no one is interested in diapers that appear pre-stained, whether the stains look like famous celebrities or not. Here he is, Dustin Heine Heider Helvie. Next. Most famous for the picture of her that appears on every box of Thin Mint Girl Scout cookies, Miss Naslund is only slightly less well known for moonlighting as Naslund, a stage name under which she performs Nas the Rapper's entire 1994 Illmatic album at music clubs in Chicago. She replaces all bad one-syllable words with the word kid, though, and all bad two-syllable words with the word flying. So without further ado, here she is, one flying kid, Miss Naslund. And third, LHS's Health and Wellness Coordinator, Miss Nelson knows a thing or two about the importance of sleep, logging more hours at the University of Chicago Library's all-night study room than any other person ever, according to the library's own records. She can also chug 1 full gallon of milk in an hour, a feat she first achieved in 3rd grade and most recently achieved in LHS's staff cafeteria last period. Not allergic to lactose, Miss Nelson. Now, we have a very scientific method for deciding who is going to read first. So why don't you guys come on up, form a triangle. The all-knowing chicken will tell us. There we go. Okay, here we go. Miss Nelson's up first.
Stop and think for a moment. Look back on your life and think of a time you were just so crazy proud of something you accomplished. Not because of the attention it got you or the award itself, but because you worked for it. Maybe for you it was a test you studied really hard for, an audition or tryout you practiced like crazy for, or a competition where you prevailed. The moment came and you killed it. Racer, ready, 3, 2, 1. I push my poles into the snow and force my right shin through the timing wand that starts the clock. I'm 14 years old, an 8th grader from Bend, Oregon, at the Alpine Skiing Western Region J3 Junior Olympics, meaning the youngest Junior Olympics one can race in alpine skiing. This year, the JOs are being held at Mount Bachelor, 20 or so miles from where I live. The race is downhill, one of 3 alpine skiing events featured at the Junior Olympics. I'm literally wearing a white motorcycle helmet. In those days, there were no special ski helmets, and a thin, tight Lycra yellow downhill suit made for speed. I'd always been a pretty good athlete. However, running was the only sport I actually felt competitive about. I had long, lanky limbs, and I loved to run, and I could run fast. In other sports, not so much of a competitor. I was the kid who coaches constantly tried to get to be more aggressive, more competitive. Me, I was just in it to have some fun and be with my friends. Sports were fun, but at heart, they were a conduit for my social life. One of my very best friends, Kim Jensen, was an avid ski racer, and I thought she was super cool. So in the 6th grade, I convinced my parents to let me try out ski racing with the local kids' ski team called the Mighty Mites. It's an understatement to say that I did not find early success in the world of ski racing. As a 6th grader, it may have been my long limbs, my fear of going too fast, or just my assumption that I would never be as good as Kim. I just wasn't that good. Still, I had a blast in my first 2 years of racing. We traveled around the Pacific Northwest. I loved my ski friends, a ski life, and just loved being in the mountains. In 8th grade, things ramped up. In ski racing world, at least in the early 80s, this was the age when you entered the more official ski racing. At every race, you got ranked according to your points, and this was then registered with the Pacific Northwest Ski Association, our division of the United States Ski Association. I improved, but other girls in the Pacific Northwest division were better than me, that it didn't really seem realistic that I could beat many of them. The points and rankings ultimately meant that the top 10 point-earning boys and girls from each division got to compete at the Junior Olympics. After each race, these rankings would come out, and I was consistently not in the top 10 on the girls' list. After the last qualifier, when all the points got added up, I came in 11th for the Pacific Northwest region, otherwise known as alternate status. I was bummed. Here, the Junior Olympics were happening practically in my backyard, and I would not be racing. Kids were to be coming in from Alaska, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Washington State, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and California. This was a big deal. I was not in it. But one night, a week or so before the event, my coach called with the news that a girl from Alaska withdrew from the event, and suddenly I was a junior Olympian. I was pumped. I could hardly believe my good fortune, and something just started clicking in my head. I am totally going for it. I will not let this opportunity pass me by. I will rise to this challenge. I am going for it. The first race was to be the downhill, the fast race. Because of how dangerous it is, you spend about 3 to 4 days learning the course and doing some trial runs. Although the course itself always changed up, the hills were still the same and my comfort level was high. This was my mountain. Everyone else, except us local kids, stayed at a local ski resort. After being up at the mountain each day, carefully learning and memorizing the course, I got to head home to my own bed while they headed to an 8th grade version of clubbing. Advantage, me. Here was my nightly routine that week. Right before bed, I'd do a 3-minute wall sit, visualizing myself in my tuck, racing down that downhill course. I had it memorized. I knew every turn. I knew every drop. My quads were ready. I was a junior Olympian. Race day came, and I got up to the starting gate. I went for it. I skied a good race. I gave it my all and proceeded down to the lodge, feeling good. I didn't give my time a second thought. Not only was it cold, and all my warm stuff was at the top of the course, I just never really finished especially well, so my time just didn't matter to me that much. About a half hour, maybe an hour later, someone came into the lodge and said, "Brenda, you're in 3rd. I froze. What? 3rd? This was just impossible. Me placing that high? So, ever try to run in ski boots? I hustled my hiney up to the finish line to look at the times. Sure enough, with all the runs and times in, I was the bronze, beating fourth place by 3/100ths of a second, ahead of all 10 of my Pacific Northwest teammates. Oh my gosh. I can only imagine what a complete spaz I must have looked like. Still in my yellow, super thin downhill suit, I run from the finish line, throw on my skis, jumped on the chairlift in windy, snowy conditions, but not feeling the least bit cold. I rode to the top in elated disbelief and profound excitement. I got off the lift. I ran up the steep hill. You had to run up the steep hill up to get up to the start. Found my dad, who was volunteering up near the starting gate. Jumped into his arms, screeching that I had placed third. Little old me, I won the bronze. True fact, I was the only Pacific Northwest girl to medal in any of the 3 events. The next day, I placed 11th in the giant slalom. Only one of my Pacific Northwest teammates placed higher. The following day, I fell in the slalom, definitely my weakest of the events. At the awards ceremony, and probably before it too, I can only imagine the suspicion in the minds of my 10 Pacific Northwest teammates. How did she beat us? How did she medal, this dark horse? But I knew. I had worked, I focused, I mastered, I medaled. Oh yes, I did it. My friends, sometimes it's not about being the best, but it's about being your best. You are capable of way more than you realize. Are you proud of something because of your hard work and focus for a goal that you're willing to work toward? Come and tell me your story. I will cheer for you, I will high five, because hard work and a subsequent cool result feels just incredible. Thank you.
All right, let's see who the chicken chooses to go second. Seriously? Naz.
All right. Oh, gosh. Chicken crash.
Hello. Oh, thanks. It's like 5 people. Hi. I can't write with a pen if there's no cap on the end of it. I have to eat my cereal out of the green bowl. The left sock always goes on before the right sock. I definitely have some compulsive quirks. I might actually border on OCD. I'm not sure. But I'm not ashamed, and I've always found a way to live with these little rules of mine. Well, here's one that some might consider extreme. I consider it tremendous. For all 48 years of my life, I have never, ever returned a library book late. I know what you're thinking. I'm probably talking about a dozen or so books, right? Oh, no. I'm an English teacher. We're talking hundreds of books over 48 years. Books checked out, read, sometimes not read, loved, sometimes not loved, and returned back to the library on time, every single one of them. There were times when I had to rush home after practice and search like a mad woman for the book under my bed table in order to get it into the library before closing time, but never had my track record of on-time books been more in jeopardy than in 1990, my sophomore year of college at UW-Madison. Let me set the scene for you. Number 1, it was freezing outside. Wisconsin freezing. Like newscasters tell you you're gonna die in a minute kind of freezing. Number 2, my roommate and I had just scarfed down burritos from La Bamba, whose tagline was, burritos as big as your head. Number 3, I was lying in bed ridiculously cozy, ready to jump back into Stephen King's Skeleton Crew. Here's the unfortunate part. The book I picked up from my bed table was not Skeleton Crew. Oh no, the book I picked up was William Faulkner's A Light in August, by the way, which was due back to the library that day. You know, I heard this, This kid's like, oh my gosh, you feel me. Thank you. You know how for most people, except for this kid, this would be too bad, a bummer, kind of annoying. Well, for me, with at the time a 20-year track record of on-time books and slight OCD, this was DEFCON 1. I think I let out a small scream. I might have cursed. All I remember is that I startled the heck out of my roommate, catapulting myself off of the bed. I checked the time on the clock, 10:52 p.m. The library would close in 8 minutes. Right? I was in a full-on panic. Okay, some of you might be thinking, this is super stupid. You're panicking about returning the wrong library book. Who cares? Pay the 10-cent fine, be done with it, weirdo. Chalk it up to one little mistake and move on. Maybe make an appointment with a therapist. Okay, I get it. But for 20 years, I had not returned a book late, and I sure wasn't going to start now. Now with 8 minutes left on the clock, that would be like finishing 99 miles of a 100-mile trek. Like seeing every Cubs home opener but one. Like pumping $20.01 worth of gas into the car. Doesn't that bug you guys? Bugs me. I knew what I had to do. Grabbing my running shoes, winter hat, mittens, and a sweatshirt, I prepared to brave the elements. My roommate stared at me like I had 3 heads. You're serious? It's like 2 degrees and you're in pajamas. Yeah, I'm serious, I panted, pulling on my hat. She was right. I was probably out of my mind. But getting this far, going that long, being that perfect in returning books was something I couldn't compromise. I bolted out the door of the room, rocketing down 2 flights of stairs to the lobby and out the door. Having been a cross-country and track runner all through high school, I knew I could make it to the library, which was about a half-mile away, in less than 5 minutes. Plus, it was all downhill. I remember 3 other things about that night. Number 1, I remember it not being as cold as I had expected. That was probably adrenaline. Number 2, I remember the library seeming a whole lot farther away than half a mile. That was probably my mind playing tricks on me. And 3, I remember that even though it was almost my bedtime, my gastrointestinal tract had just woken up. That would be the burrito. No big deal, I remember thinking. I'll make it. It'll pass. I'll get there, I'll return the book on time, and I'll use the bathroom by the first floor stacks. All good. They're not going to lock the doors exactly at 11, right? Right? I was close to being in a full-on sprint when a gas bubble of death ripped across my gut. Then another. This was bad. This was really bad. I was less than halfway to the library, and little elves in my intestines were taking small, elf-sized razor blades, slicing my insides with them. I slowed my pace a little. Then the heat started. My stomach became a deep fryer, and the burrito parts were slowly simmering. I remember a specific moment when I seriously wondered whether someone might have put a laxative in my burrito. Slowing down even more, I finally had to face the predicament I was in. My perfect, pristine, unblemished track record of returning library books on time was in jeopardy of being soiled. So were my pajamas. I had a choice. Do I continue on, withstand the rage of Mount Vesuvius in my stomach and forge ahead, keeping my hot streak of on-time books alive, hoping that some stroke of luck would keep those doors open? Or do I turn around, relieved of the pain, but my record of on-time books forever tarnished? I forged on. The swords of Joffrey Lannister continued thrashing in my abdomen, and I could feel myself nearing the point where I would be unable to hold in the boiling burrito bile working its way through my belly. I remember panting, doubled over, breathing pep talks to myself. I might have cursed. I had to walk for a bit in order to allow the nuclear burrito bomb to settle a bit, but luckily the doors of the library were in my sights. Gripping my stomach, sweating in 2-degree weather, I broke back into a run, believing with everything I had in me, which was very clearly a very angry burrito, that I would be able to reach the drop box before closing. And I did. I did. William Faulkner was back in the library. There would be no blemish on my unsullied track record of on-time book returns. There would also be no bathroom. The doors were locked, the lights were off, and I had to travel half-mile uphill back to my dorm. But that, my friends, is another story. The only two who know what happened on that trip back are me and a small wooded area just off of Observatory Drive.
All right, thank you, Miss Naslund. That was ill. Mr. Helvie, you are up next.
I'm not really quite sure how to follow up that one, but I will do my best. So I've struggled with lower back pain through most of my life. I'd like to share a little story how that began. Back in a magical time called the 90s, just like Miss Naslund was telling us about, I had finished my sophomore year in college and was looking for a summer job, like most of you look for summer jobs. I know most of you weren't even born in the 90s, so just listen. It was a magical time. I was home for the summer and had to work to make some money for the following year. I tried many different jobs. I was a caddy, sold Cutco knives. Any knife salesmen out there? I know there are some of you because you've tried to sell me some. Passed out flyers for a cleaning service, but none of these were really fulfilling. So I stumbled upon a entertainment company, and I was trying to find something that was fun and unique to do on the weekend. So I came across this company called Those Funny Little People. Anybody heard of the Little People? No. Fantastic. Well, this is going to be really good. So let's take a little, can we show them the picture of what the little people are? All right. So has anybody seen them now? Okay, you kind of know what I'm talking about? All right. So I thought, this is a perfect match for me, right? If you're really interested, you should check out their 2011 video on America's Got Talent. Okay? That being said, so I auditioned for them. They hired me. Just a little bit about the company. They've been around for 30-plus years, performing all over the Chicagoland area, weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, retirements. And the gist of the show is it's about 20 minutes, and it contains music and like a little storyline. They usually have 2 performers and then a representative that comes along for each show. And the representative kind of takes care of the payment and plays the music, and then also acts kind of like a bodyguard of sorts. Because, you know, anytime you get around little kids, you know, when you go to Disney and you see all the characters there, kids are like not quite sure, and they're pulling and they're hitting. It's not a good situation. So that's kind of like what our representative is there for. So that's a little background. I was performing for a wedding downtown Chicago. This is my 2nd or 3rd time out. And I learned very, very quickly, the later you perform, the more rowdier the crowds are. Okay? I'll just leave it at that. Use your imagination. The show was going really well. The guests were having a great time. The last song we do of the show is the Roam. And that's kind of like where we go out and interact with all the audience, get close and personal. Well, this time, I guess I got too personal with somebody. So the music was loud, bright lights were flashing everywhere, people were dancing. The next thing I know, this big guy, from what I could see, and I don't know if you can tell where the performer sees out of, but I will give you a hint. It's in the hat. Okay? So it's not very big. It's just, you know, like a very small, tiny little rectangle. So your vision is very limited. This guest, this very rowdy guest, was going to show everyone at the wedding how strong he was and how funny he could be. And he picked me up by my legs, and I thought to myself, well, how is this going to end? Because I have no idea. Like he was going to put me on his shoulders almost, right? Like, oh, I'm going to be the funny guy and get everyone's attention and put this little person on my shoulders. Now keep in mind, I have no use of my arms. My arms are inside the costume, okay? So I can't push myself away. The next thing I know, he picks me up, and I'm way above his head, because he's grabbed me by kind of like the shins. And I'm trying to wiggle my way out of his arms. But like I said, he was very big and very strong, and that was not working. So my heart starts beating really fast, and I'm sweating, and I actually have no idea how this is going to end. I'm like, oh, well, he'll just put me down, it'll be fine. And then bam! I'm on the floor, on my back, writhing in pain. And I have no idea what has happened. The next thing I know, I'm opening my eyes, and everybody's like a circle of people around me, all looking at me. And I'm like, well, what just happened? I have no idea. The last thing I remember is being picked up, and now I'm on the floor. And I actually, the rep comes over to make sure that I'm okay, and I'm able to get up. But I don't really remember anything after he picked me up. It happened all so fast. And I do think the padding of the costume really kind of saved my back. So the rep said to me, you really don't know what happened? I said, no, I have no idea. And she said, that guy just body slammed you to the floor. And the more I thought about it and tried to put the pieces together, I'm like, well, that's probably why my back had so much pain. So fast forward a little bit, we still don't know who the strong man was, because again, we were in so much shock that something like this could have happened, Anyway, we're more concerned with just my well-being and kind of getting out of that show and being done with it. So I told the owners of the company what happened. This was something that had never happened before. At that point, it was about 20 years they had been in business. With being a seasonal employee just during the summer, there was no workman's comp or anything like that. So it didn't really feel like a visit to the hospital was necessary. I'm like, no, I'll just shake it off. I'll take some ibuprofen, put some ice on it, and just rest. Since then, I've had lower back problems on and off. I've seen a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, an orthopedic specialist, and they've only helped very minimally. So I've learned some stretches with some yoga that I've done that kind of have helped a little with the pain. But I continued to perform through the rest of the summer and was just very cautious with friendly guests who wanted to get too close and personal with the little people. Thank you.
All right, there we go. So now, hopefully you are listening carefully. We have a chance for you to ask questions, trying to figure out who is lying and who is telling the truth. If you have a question, put your hand very high in the air. Oh boy. We may want to screen this question ahead of time.
Okay, so this is Naslund. What town were you in?
Madison, Wisconsin.
Can you describe the cover of the book you returned?
The cover of Light in August?
Yes.
It's gold and it's got black. It's a nondescript cover. It's a terrible book.
Okay. Next up.
Any questions on this side?
What part of Madison, Wisconsin?
Well, I was on campus. I went to UW-Madison, so I was, if you mean what part, I was in between my dorm, which is Elizabeth Waters Hall, and I was going to Helen C. White Library, which is about a half a mile down a hill on Observatory Drive. Is that specific enough for you?
Naslund, we have another question for you here about your timeline.
All right. So most university libraries are open 24 hours.
They were not in 1990.
Oh.
Yeah, that's kind of a new thing. It would have been really nice if they
11
had
is
been.
suspicious.
Yeah,
That's all
no.
I'm saying.
Our libraries all closed on weekdays around 11, at 11. Some of them stayed open later, but that particular one closed at 11.
All right, we got a question for Dr. Nelson.
How many total competitors were there for your competition for the
I was
Olympics?
thinking about that this morning. I think it was, so if there were probably 5, 6, 7 regions or divisions, so I think there were less than 100, is what I'm thinking.
All right, we got a question for Dr. Helvie.
Yes, Dr. Helvie, who would actually hire these little people for a wedding? I don't understand any of that. Please expound.
Yeah, believe it or not, there are people that hire them for themselves, like a bride or groom would hire them because they love the little people, or they would be hired by mother of the groom, father of the bride, aunts, uncles. And believe it or not, there are some times that the little people are not welcome. Like we have been asked to leave the reception because the bride is so upset that we are spoiling her special day.
Miss Nelson, we have a question for you back here.
Did you say you placed 11th in the giant slalom?
Correct.
But you said there were only 10 competitors.
No, there were 10 competitors from the Pacific Northwest Division.
Oh.
I was the 11th alternate. I mean, I was the first alternate 11th, then I moved up, but then I was 11th place in the giant slalom. And so of all the divisions, there were, I don't know, there were definitely less than 100 competitors. Maybe there were 80, something like that.
We got a question for Drs. Nelson and Helvie.
So, Mr. Helvie and Dr. Nelson, how late were your college campus libraries open?
You know, again, I and Ms. Naslund went to college around the same time, so I would probably say I did not spend a lot of time at the library like Ms. Naslund did. So I would assume that our libraries were closed around 11 as well, because we were both Big Ten schools. I went to Iowa and she went to Wisconsin.
Miss Naslund, where did you get the burrito from again?
It was a place called La Bamba, and they had their slogan. Yeah, Dr. Nelson knows. Do you know La Bamba? Yeah. La Bamba. Their slogan was burritos as big as your head, and they truly were. They were huge burritos. Clearly.
Dr. Nelson, I have a question. So if you were at the Junior Olympics, why was it only people from the Pacific Northwest?
It wasn't. So you might have noticed that I said they were from Alaska. They were from Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, Montana. Did I say Montana? Utah, California. So it was the whole Western region Junior Olympics. The Pacific Northwest just had its own team.
Yeah, something doesn't add up here. So you said...
I'm sorry, what?
Something doesn't add up. You said you walked from the library back to your dorm, but you relieved yourself before you could get back to your dorm in the woods. But on Observatory Drive in Madison, Wisconsin, you would have to walk further to get to the woods. Did you know that?
Right. Well, that's true, because you have to go the...
Let her answer.
Well, interesting. I mean, I'm not going to let that happen right on the side of the road. So, yes, I walked into the wooded area. The dorm is here. You walk down the hill a little bit, and there are lots of trees. There's a bike path, the lake, and then the library is down the hill. So, yes, I mean, campuses can be a little bit of a busy place at night, but there were lots of trees.
All right, one more question, please.
Mr. Helvie, could you act out some of the little people actions for me, please?
You know, I could, but I've signed an oath that I cannot perform without my costume.
All right, thank you so much. Now we are going to ask for the liar to stand up, but before we do, let's see who you think is lying. How many of you, by a show of hands, think Mr. Helvie is lying to you? All right. How many of you think Dr. Nelson is lying to you? A little bit more, it looks like. And how many of you think Naz is lying to you? Interesting. No one trusts you, Naz? Yeah.
They don't know.
All right. Can we please have the real liar stand up? Oh, you were right. Nice question over there. You're right not to trust her. All right, so now we are going to bring out our two improv poets to share their Chicken, Raspberry, and Grandpa poem. Come on to the stage. So we all know well, at least for me, whenever I ask my students to write poetry, I met with a lot of groans. So it's kind of fun to make your teachers do it. Which one of you would like to read your poem first?
I'm going to go first. All right. I'm Dr. Reiff, by the way, the supervisor of the English department. It's nice to share my poem with you. I want to be a grandpa. I've got the gray hair, but I'm lacking the grandkids. I want my sons to hurry up and get married and start their families. I loved being a dad when my sons were little. I want to relive the thrill of having little children to love. I want to make breakfast for the grandkids, pancakes, sausage, and toast with raspberry jam. I want grandkids that will sit in my lap for story time. I want to reread and reread and reread all the classics, Where the Wild Things Are, The Velveteen Rabbit, and The Giving Tree. I want to feel once again the weightless freight of a little one perched on my shoulders. I hope my sons start their families soon. I know that's selfish of me, but what's taken so long? Are they afraid of committing to marriage? Are they afraid of having children? What are they, chicken? I hope not, because I really want to be a grandpa.
I'm Mrs. Lamaistre. Thanks. And I wrote a poem called Tuesdays. My grandfather passed away quickly and slowly, all at once. He was fine, and then he wasn't. It was nothing really, he told us, just some stomach pains, a waning appetite, but then it was cancer. I can remember the idea of this sudden and impending loss overwhelming me. And I can vividly remember folding my laundry or making a grocery list or doing some other mundane, ordinary thing and trying to convince myself that it had happened already, that he was gone. I remember trying to feel what it felt like as I folded my shirts into neat piles or wrote out my list, milk, lettuce, raspberries, chicken, and feel normal, like it was just Tuesday. I tried to conjure this new life, this new after, to show myself, I think, that it could be done. It was like I needed to practice the losing. I needed to know I'd be okay. Like so many things, it happened and felt exactly and not at all the way I'd imagined. And life did go on. It does go on. And like with so many things, the loss was harder and maybe not so hard as I thought it would be. And sometimes now, when I'm folding my laundry or watching my children play or making a grocery list or doing some other mundane thing, I will try to convince myself that it's all those years ago. It's before. And I find life really can feel the way it once did. The befores can feel not so different from the afters. And I have found life really can feel like a Tuesday, and a grocery list can be just that, just milk, lettuce, raspberries, chicken. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That's really tough to do. All right, by a round of applause, we're going to do a little vote. How many of you liked Dr. Reiff's poem? That was really sweet, very sentimental. And how many of you liked Miss Lamaistre's poem? That's pretty even. Good job to you two. Very nice. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left or so, and so I thought we'd take this opportunity real quick. If you would like to take a seat over there. Oh, that's okay. We were going to give you guys the opportunity to ask some writing process questions because we had 3 stories up here. You guys took a little time to write those stories, but then we also had 2 improv writers, and that's kind of a hard task too. So I'm going to give you guys any opportunity to ask a question of them in their writing process. Does anyone have any questions? Do you outline, and if so, in how much detail, maybe the planned writers versus the improv writers? What's your process like?
So it was really hard for me to write mine because it was not true. The library and the woods, by the way, are there. So some of it was based on truth. I did go to Wisconsin. I do have little quirks. But what I had to do is I had to kind of figure out what was it that I wanted to convey, and I needed to convey that there was that difficult choice that I had to make of either returning the book or, using the bathroom. And so I actually ran it by a bunch of people and got suggestions, and then I tried to figure out, that's my main conflict. My main conflict is that choice. What's going to make the choice even harder? And then I have to make sure that when the choice is made, that's kind of a turning point. So I had those sort of 3 things that I drafted out.
I think that if just depends on the content. If I'm in this particular case, I have told this story verbally a ton of times, but I've never written it out. So for me, it was just writing out and really trying to determine what kind of details do I want to include. How do I make it not just an extemporaneous story, but how do I actually turn it into something that a whole auditorium wants to hear, or maybe not. So typically I outline if it's just about content. But in this case, I just kind of free-formed and then did a second draft, and that was kind of it.
Much like Dr. Nelson, I kind of just started writing and talked to Ms. Naslund and kind of got her feedback, but I struggled with how much detail to give and how much to make vague. So it kind of made the audience wonder, well, is he telling the truth? Is he telling a lie? So that's kind of how I started my process.
What about the improv writers? How did you go about writing a poem in just 20 minutes?
So it was actually pretty fun because when my sons were little, in addition to reading them books, I would like to tell them stories, especially at night. So frequently I'd actually have them say well, just name 3 things. So they might say, tell a story with a car and a key and a tree, and then so that I would create a story that tried to hit on those 3 things. So it was kind of like the outline. I'd read an outline, and I was like, I'm writing, I'm going to start with Grandpa, and then I just knew I had to get somehow to a raspberry, and then somehow to a chicken. So I was like, that was the outline. So I really didn't have to create one, because it was all there already.
Sure. And I'll just say, I find that I work best under pressure, so the idea that I had 20 minutes actually worked to my benefit. I had one other thing I was going to say. I work well with these types of activities. I don't find that the muse finds me. I really need to have some sort of purpose in writing, so I'd offer that.
Mrs. Lamaistre, when did you know you were going to come back around to the list at the end of the poem?
That's actually based partly in truth. I remember folding my laundry and thinking, I can feel what it's going to feel like when my grandfather passes away. And so I just wanted to put I had listed that and something else mundane, and then I thought, I could put the grocery list in and then use it. So that was just sort of luck.
There's the bell. Thanks so much for being a great audience, everybody. Have a great day.